I was thinking about one of those very famous ads that have aired in the past decade. You may remember the Truth campaign. It was an anti-smoking campaign aimed at teens. And one of the things that I thought was so smart about that campaign was that it tapped into the natural defiance that people of that age have. And in that case, to combat the what was being portrayed as a positive representation of cool kids and teenagers smoking, um, they tried to really reverse that. And they did that by saying these big corporations are lying to you. Don't fall for it. And they tapped into that sense of defiance. And I read your book and wondered if maybe that sense of defiance is useful to try to tap into for teens and tweens, that there are people out there lying to you or trying to manipulate the way you think. Don't let them succeed. Here's how you can be savvier and outsmart them.
I think that's so smart. I mean, one of the things I think we have to remember is that if we preach this to kids, if we try to shove it down their throats, they are not going to listen, right? We have to make it fun and we have to work within their worlds and the way that they think, right? So, you can turn this into I mean, if it's younger kids, of course, you can turn it into a game. Social media is their world. They love it, right? So work within that world. Find a fake video and a real video and sit down with your kid and say, which one do you think is real? And then have them try to figure it out and start asking those questions that prompt them to think in a critical way. And so I think you're onto something there, which is like, let's talk to them about this in ways that will engage them and kind of be in their world.
And I love that. This is a good time to mention that at the end of your book, you have tools and links for tweens, teens, parents, and teachers to improve their media literacy. We will post those links on this episode's show page on our website as well at throughlinegroup.com/podcast. So if listeners are interested in doing those types of activities you just mentioned, there will be resources they can click to find that. I thought you did a very good job. Since you brought up social media, you talked about that by writing social media sites track what you click on, what you like or heart, and what you respond to most. They use this information to automatically feed you more of what you like and less of what you don't. So you'll stay on the site and keep clicking and sharing. Instead of being introduced to new ideas, you get more information about what you already know. So if the social media bubble sends someone false information that echoes what they already believe to be true, they may be more likely to be fooled.
Yes.
So how do you pop that social media bubble that keeps feeding you more of the same to try to get you to confirm your views that much more?
And especially for kids, because their social media is their entire world, right? That is their world and they have no need to go outside of it. I mean, if it were up to them, right? So I think, again, the important thing here is, first of all, that kids understand the context that they're in when they're on social media. So it's important to share with them that, yes, what you are seeing is coming to you because you have clicked on other things like it, and it's going to be more of what you like, and it's going to validate what you already believe. So that's step number one, just for them to know that, right? And then that there's all of this other information out there in the world. So it would be great if they were willing, if we can get them to look at other sources every now and then, just close the window and look at something else. But at least in the event where they see something on social media that's really shocking or that they make wonder if it's true, that is really the time for them to close the window and do a Google search and see what else comes up. And I think once they have that basic understanding, it creates a framework for what they're seeing.
Yes. I'll give you another example from my own life. I mentioned to you, I have a 6 and an 8-year-old, and they're both baseball nuts. And my 8-year-old likes to watch on YouTube a guy who kind of debriefs on the previous night's baseball games. And my 8-year-old came to me and said, Garrett Cole, who's a star pitcher for the New York Yankees, has been cheating. He uses something called spider tack to make his hands stickier and changes the spin rate on the ball. And I said, where are you hearing that? And he said, on YouTube. And he told me the guy who is saying those things. And I said, there's been an accusation of that, but there's been no evidence of that. There's a difference between an accusation and proof. And we should be a little bit careful. Now, it turns out in hindsight, that accusation turned out to be true, but it did kind of highlight for me okay, I as a dad need to do a better job of listening in more to what he's listening to on these seemingly benign YouTube pages. Beyond just being aware of what your kids are
Mhm.
consuming, what else can parents and educators do to help improve their kids' literacy?
Yeah, I mean, I think, actually the first thing that you can do is become a very savvy media consumer yourself, right? Like we all need help these days being media literate. This is hard, right? So I think the first thing is to check yourself and see how you're doing, and then really model that behavior for your kids as well. But then I think also, as I mentioned earlier, I think really engaging with them in a way that's in their world and that they understand, and really, taps into the kinds of things that they're looking at, and kind of using these as examples to kind of press them a little bit, right? To get to ask them questions that get them thinking critically, and also to help them understand, not only about checking sources, but also what are the consequences if you share a false video, right? These are things that kids don't think about, consequences like that. So I think for parents to keep saying, where do you think this came from? And why do you think this is real? And if it wasn't real, what would the consequences be of sharing it? And to help kids kind of think through those steps, you know?
That's really smart. I like
Yeah.
that idea of having that discussion. What are the consequences? That's something I wouldn't have thought of doing. I do worry that a lot of the parents themselves are not news literate. Part of that is, as
Hmm.
you said, it's
Hmm.
hard. I've shared in this episode now 2 times when I've been fooled, and there are two of
Hmm.
many. And you look at stats, you look at the number of Americans who believe the 2020 election was a
Yes.
fraud, or you look at vaccine hesitancy based on
Hmm.
misinformation. You look at uh, a tech CEO being accused by probably, and millions of people likely believe this, of implanting a chip into the vaccine to track their behaviors, as if the phone they're carrying
Hmm.
around voluntarily in their pocket doesn't stand a much better chance of any of that
Hmm.
anyway. Um, how do you think about, and I know this is a much bigger question than a single book, but how do you think about reaching parents who themselves are not very news literate?
That is a really hard question. And I mean, I think they have to want to be reached, right? So it's very hard to reach people who don't want to be reached. But I think we can all look ourselves in the mirror and know that, there are really extreme examples of, I mean, the 2020 election being the one that is, of course, first and foremost in our minds, of the power of misinformation and how many people believe it. And also the horrible consequences of it, right? I mean, there was an insurrection against the Capitol because people believed these lies. And so these things have really big consequences. Um, so I think as adults, we may not be, most of us may not be that extreme, but it's important for us to recognize that we all do live in somewhat of a similar bubble to what these, insurrectionists believed, right? They kept following, they only listened to what they thought was true. They lived in a bubble that supported and reinforced what they thought, and created like an alternate reality, right, of what truth is. And we all do this to a certain extent, maybe not to such extremes. And so I think it's just important for us to look in the mirror and say, like, how much are we doing this, and challenge ourselves to get outside of our own bubbles. I mean, nothing is going to be, is going to hit everybody, but I think we can start with ourselves, really.
Thanks for watching this video clip of the Speak Good podcast. If you'd like to hear the complete episode, please check out your favorite podcast directory and subscribe now. Thanks for watching.